Hello, I am the Dungeon Tutor. Welcome. Since 2016, I've been answering your questions, giving advice and inspiration to countless gamers. Here, you can ask questions in the comments and get your own videos as an answer. So I encourage you, enjoy by all means, but come back to visit with your friend, the Dungeon Tutor. Hello, my friends. I am the Dungeon Tutor. Welcome! Today is day 6 of RPGaDay 2025, and today's topic is motive. Now, motive is a word that has two different meanings, one of which few people consider. Motive means able to move. Like a motivator is something that directs something to move. But in this particular case, most people understand motive to be the thing that drives somebody, as in a goal, a command, a directive to act. And that's not terribly difficult to understand, of course. Many characters in our games, in our adventures, have a vested motive that is primarily the reason we care about them. Why do they do something? That's ultimately the question. It's the why part. Why does somebody do anything? And characters that don't have a motive usually come off as completely nonsensical. Even if it's random, their whole point is that they don't do anything with a purpose, that still comes off as two-dimensional and unsatisfying generally. Motives are important because oftentimes it's the context that gives everything else purpose. Why is the big bad evil guy so darn evil? Well, there's probably a good reason for it somewhere other than he's evil because he needs to be evil to be the big bad evil guy. That's lazy design. That's... And another thing you're going to find, too, with a lot of people with poorly conceived motivations is just something, a blanket statement like, well, they're just crazy. Crazy isn't necessarily evil, though. So if they're crazy and they are moving towards evil ends, that often is very, very unsatisfying. Whereas a villain who is evil because, well, they have a purpose, and it's actually possibly even a noble one, but they're driving with it with such single-minded intensity, they don't care about costs. They don't care about collateral damage. And that can make them seem villainous. Motives are important because they are what we look to. One of the first questions we ask anybody when we start asking questions as children is, why? Why this? Why is this way? Why that? And when we're asking that, it's as much a search for knowledge, but also a search to understand. We want to understand. We want things to make sense. We want to be able to put it in a mental box so that we can anticipate things and understand how they came about. And ultimately, when you hear me talk on videos about things that happen in a game, one expression I will use frequently is I talk about vectors. Now, what's a vector? A vector is a point and a direction and an intensity. It's where you start, which in terms of a role-playing game could very easily be when the party first meets them, but it may also be if you have a deeper world and a deeper idea behind what the characters are doing. It may be the thing that set that character off on the path they would eventually take. So, for instance, if your character is a nihilist, they want to destroy everything, why? It makes no sense to your average person because we mostly have a pretty good urge to survive. So, nihilism is pretty dumb as a motivator for most circumstances. However, obviously, an unhinged mind comes largely to point. But what drove a person to that point where they hate all of existence to the point they want to see it all done? They want to make it end. They want to see it all end. And ultimately, themselves too. But it's not enough just to end themselves. They want to end everything. Why? What would be the motive for that? And then if you start thinking about that, you think about pain, real pain. What kind of pain? The loss of something valuable? Of incredible suffering? You need some pretty big elements so that when you have a cult, a nihilistic cult that is working towards the end of the world, you have to think every single person in that cult has a reason why they want everything to end. Is it the charisma of the leader who convinces them that by ending everything, they will gain everything? And that maybe in another existence, they will profit for being a part of this? It's something that's possible. It's something that is conceivable that a person might believe that, especially if the person preferring it is extremely charismatic and extremely believable for one reason or another. That might be how your cultists got there. But in general, the idea of a cult that would be nihilistic makes very little sense. So if you're going to have your players face faceless cultists who don't matter and just exist as a set of stats on the book, well, those triumphs they get aren't going to be tremendously thrilling. They're just going to be a triumph over the person who they're supposed to be, because the story says so. That's not always the most satisfying thing. As a matter of fact, I find it rarely to be a satisfying thing. I think beating endless, faceless enemies is kind of, I don't know, somewhat off-putting. It detracts from the humanity of your character. You're not fighting to win anything. You're fighting because you're expected to fight. And that helps the players have a hard time finding their motives, too. Because, again, if you're just doing it to watch the numbers get bigger as you level up and so on and so forth, and you take your victories on the broken bodies of your enemies, sure, we aren't going to read too much into that. Motive's not that much of a factor. They are there, therefore we fight them. That is how that works. But once you start really realizing your character, once that character becomes concrete inside your head, and you become less and less satisfied with the murder hobo way of life, where just defeating things is just what you do because it's the expedient thing to do. Well, if you start doing that, and you start thinking to yourself, self? Why does my character get up in the morning? To get more power. It's kind of abstract. I got plenty of power right now. Maybe it's to defeat an enemy. Why? What's my motivation to defeat that enemy? Because they're evil and they might do bad things. Why would they do that? I mean, they're not that much different from me, right? And that is partly one of the reasons why we often used to, in days gone by, slap blanket motivations on things like, you kill orcs. Why? Because any orc would gladly kill you and take your stuff, and if you leave them to live, they're going to make more orcs who are also going to be motivated to kill you and everybody you know, and a couple of orcs left behind are going to create lots and lots and lots and lots of other orcs, and that's just going to be a whole mess. So you're kind of honor bound to kill them. Same goes with goblins, kobolds, any other past type monster. That's really technically beneath your characters to kill. I mean, you get to a point and goblins just aren't a threat anymore, perhaps. Yes, I know. A good game master can make goblins a threat no matter what level you're at if they're devious enough, but stick with me here. So, the player's motive is often carved by the world in circumstances like that, but isn't it that much more enjoyable to let your players pick a focus, a reason to want to move forward against that big bad evil guy we were talking about? Finding out why they're doing things often makes that struggle, that climax, that much more interesting. Particular game I like to play back in the day, Wizard 101, which is a massively multiplayer online role-playing game, which is a card game, basically. And there was some nice storytelling elements to it. It's very well voice acted. It's free, at least to play in the early stages it's free, and after that you can expand it. But it's a lovely little game, and it's got a neat story, because you have the arch enemy, Malastare, an evil wizard, He looks evil and he sounds evil, so he is a proper evil wizard. And he's stumbling against, this young student who thwarts him a couple of times. That's you, by the way. And you come to find out as he goes along that he destroyed the death school of your magical school, and Ravenwood, and he goes off taking things that he needs for his grand scheme. And what is his grand scheme? It's pretty nihilistic. He wants to awaken a dragon capable of massive devastation, if not complete destruction of all sorts of everything. The dragon, which is curled around his tower, by the way, in Dragonspire, it's truly an epic thing. And why? What is his motivation? Is he just crazy? No, he's not. As you go on through the storyline, you find out, partially from his brother, Cyrus, who is the master of the myth school, and partly from other things and interactions that you have along the way, he's motivated because his wife died. And he was overwrought with grief. He blamed the magics of life for failing to save her. He could not cure her disease, and she died. And he could not come to grips with that. So his intention is to wake this dragon and make the dragon bring his wife back to life. Even if she doesn't want it. You do find the ghost of his wife, and she's sad. She's sad for him. She knows he's suffering tremendously. It's tragic. The whole story is very tragic. But Malastare isn't evil. Not really. He is a good man. For all intents and purposes, it is truly a fall that he is trying to bring his wife back no matter the consequences, which ultimately is the transition to evil. It is the corruption because he sees the end justifying the means, and the means is too much. Clearly too much. The players do not have a problem fighting back against Malastare. Even he is the only enemy that you really canonically kill. You know this because his wife Sylvia comes by and picks him up and they go off. So, he is the one person who ends up dying as a result of your duels. Everybody else, not so much. You don't get the impression that they're dead. They're just banished or what have you. But the name level characters all don't die from your conflict. Malastare is the only one. And, by the way, if this is a spoiler alert necessary, Wizard 101 has been around for a long time. 20 years now, I think. It's getting close. So, it's cool. You'll play it, though. It's a fun game. I enjoyed it quite a bit. If you spend some money and unlock the whole game or get the subscription, there's a lot of interesting content. There's a lot of depth to the game. It's actually quite fun. But that motive makes him a sympathetic character rather than just a hand-wringing, mustache-twirling villain. He does have a pretty good mustache, though. I'll give him that. It's not, big one, but he has the Van Dyke down perfect. And quite honestly, that is a much better villain. You feel much, much more conflicted about the tragedy of fighting Malastare because he's so powerful and so smart. If only he could have let his wife go. He could have been a brilliant mind that your character might have studied from and really learned a ton. Instead, if you're a death student, a proper necromancer, you actually have to get a cobbled together education from a very talented former student and the former caretaker of the death school. And that's, what more could you have learned from Malastare, perhaps? I don't know. It's fascinating to me. I think that storyline was really well written and well parted out to give proper motivation, to give it something that you would care about. And it succeeded. I did like it, and I remember it very well to this day. So that is something that you should consider when making characters at all, both player characters and non-player characters. A motive, a goal, a driving force. A, it justifies a lot of your activities, perhaps, but B, it leaves it so that you're never just floundering about, what do I do? Your character should have a goal, just like you probably have a goal. Maybe not a life-staking one that drives everything you do, but characters in role-playing games are usually elevated and magnified. And sometimes, very likely, driven by something. What? What is your vector? Where does it start? And where does it direct you, and how strong is it? Is it an all-encompassing fire that constantly spurs you into action? Maybe. Certainly, that can be very compelling as a storyline. Finding out your motivation, finding out how far you're willing to go for something. Absolutely. But on a lesser scope, it makes your characters fit into the world and make sense. And ultimately, isn't that what we really want? A more realistic world and sympathetic characters, or understandable characters at the very least. Not just shackled down to a lazy slap-down. They're insane, that's why they're doing it. How did they get insane? Maybe that could be interesting. I don't know. But it's something to explore. Motives are important. And hopefully, going forward, you consider motive for your characters, motive for your creations, and it makes everything a little bit richer. So, thank you very much for joining me. I am the Dungeon Tutor, and it's been my pleasure to present this day of RPG-a-Day for you. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you do consider liking, subscribing if you haven't done already. Notify yourself when I make new videos. And really, maybe think of leaving a comment. Think of, your favorite motivation for a character that you really love, or maybe even a motivation you came up with that most people don't even consider. That would be great, because, you could be helping a lot of people with a comment like that. But I do hope to see you again. That's why I do these things. And I'll keep making these videos, so hopefully, between that next video and now, that you, yes, you, have had a chance to roll some dice, play some games, have some fun. Stay safe out there, friends. Until that next time, farewell.